We all live somewhere, right? A city, a suburb, a small town. But have you ever, really stopped to think about who gets to decide what those places look and feel like? Who's in charge? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig right into that very question. Who gets to write the story of our landscapes?
Okay, picture this. You've probably been there. You're in some school gym or a community hall, right? Staring at these complicated blueprints for a new high rise. They call it public consultation, but honestly, it feels more like you're being lectured at. You try to speak up, say your piece, but you get this sinking feeling that the real decisions, yeah, they were made a long, long time ago. Sound familiar? And right there, that's the huge paradox we're tackling today. I mean, public participation, it's supposed to be the foundation of democratic planning, right? So why does it so often feel like it's just a box-ticking exercise? A process that ends up silencing people more than it actually empowers them. So to really get why things feel so broken, we've got to go back in time a bit and see how we even got here. Because this isn't a new problem. Oh no. It's the legacy of a really old playbook, one where the public, well, they didn't have a role at all. So the whole way we think about city planning has actually gone through some pretty big shifts over the years. First up, back in the 40s to the 60s, you had something called rational planning. Then the 60s came along and shook things up with advocacy planning. And for the last couple of decades, the big idea has been collaborative planning. So, that first era, rational planning. The really crucial thing to get is that planning was seen as a pure science. The planner was the expert, kind of like a doctor, and the city was the patient on the operating table. They had all the data, all the expertise. And the public? Oh, the public was seen as, well, ignorant, emotional. Their opinions were just noise getting in the way of a perfectly rational, scientific solution. Okay, so we moved on from that, right? Thank goodness. Today, the big buzzword you always hear is collaboration. Let's bring everyone into the room. Let's build consensus. And yeah, on the surface, that sounds awesome. But it's created a whole new and honestly a much more sneaky problem. And this slide just lays it out perfectly, the huge gap between the promise and the reality. The idea, the promise, is that if we just get everyone in a room and talk long enough, developers, residents, the city, we'll all find some happy common ground. But the reality? Well, as critics like Marcus Lane have pointed out, it often looks a lot more like the other side. Because let's be real, not everyone in that room has the same amount of power. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. The whole process assumes everyone can speak equally. But come on. In reality, a big developer walks in with a team of expensive lawyers and these slick, polished presentations. A local resident walks in with, well, with their personal story and their passion. The process pretends those two voices are equal, but they're not even close. So collaboration can actually end up just reinforcing the status quo, creating this illusion of agreement while the powerful just get what they wanted all along. All right, so let's recap. The expert knows best model failed because it ignored people. The let's all just agree model fails because it ignores power. So that leaves us with a massive question. If consensus is basically an illusion, then how can we have real democracy and planning? Well, the answer lies in two powerful ideas that don't just tweak the rules, they completely change the game. The first game changer is this shift from focusing on logos, or logic, to embracing pathos, emotion, and story. For decades, planning has been completely obsessed with data, right? Traffic flowcharts, economic projections, all that logical stuff. But the new way argues that what really moves people, what actually defines a place, isn't a spreadsheet, it's the stories, the memories, the emotions connected to it. And this is the absolutely brilliant insight from a planner named Sandercock. She says that stories don't just describe our world, they literally create our world. Think about it. If the official story of a neighborhood is it's blighted and run down, well, that's all the justification you need to demolish it. But what if residents tell a counter story, a story of a vibrant community with deep roots? Suddenly, you have a reason to save it. It's all about empowering those unheard voices and recognizing that their stories aren't just emotional fluff, they are incredibly powerful political tools. Okay, the second huge shift is even more counterintuitive, so hang with me here. What if the goal isn't to get rid of conflict? I know, it sounds weird. The old goal, consensus, usually just papers over the cracks of real disagreements.
This new goal, it's called agonism, argues that in a healthy democracy, conflict isn't just permanent, it's actually a good thing. It's productive. Now, let's be super clear. Agonism isn't about creating a chaotic free-for-all where everyone is just yelling at each other. No. The key idea is that you have to design a process, an arena, if you will, where these deep disagreements can be aired out and debated respectfully. So think of it less like a fight to the death and more like a healthy, structured rivalry. The goal isn't to crush your opponent or force them to agree with you. It's about recognizing them as a legitimate adversary whose ideas deserve to be heard, even if you totally fundamentally disagree. You're trying to turn destructive shouting matches into a constructive political contest that actually energizes democracy instead of shutting it down.
So when you take these two huge ideas together, the power of telling stories and the value of healthy conflict, you land on something much, much bigger than just public participation. And this is the ultimate shift in thinking. Drawing from ideas like the European Landscape Convention, the goal is no longer just about public participation as some procedural step on a planner's checklist. No, it's about landscape democracy as a fundamental right, the right for people to have a real, meaningful say in defining and shaping the places where they live.
This famous idea, Sherry Arnstein's ladder of participation, shows us exactly what this means in practice. If you look down at the bottom rungs, you've got stuff like manipulation and, there it is, informing and consultation. That's where most of those public meetings we talked about live. Arnstein had a word for this: tokenism. It's not real power. Real landscape democracy, real citizen power, that only begins when you start climbing to the very top of that ladder, up to partnership and full citizen control. So what does it actually look like when a community manages to climb that ladder all the way to the top? Let's make this real. Let's make this concrete with an absolutely incredible story of bottom-up democracy in action from Trondheim, Norway.
So this is Svartlamoen. The city's official story was that this was a rundown, working-class area that just needed to be demolished. Simple as that. But the residents, they told a very, very different story. And they didn't just show up to the city's meetings to complain. No way. They completely redefined the entire debate. They started telling a powerful counter-story, reframing their neighborhood as an innovative, pioneering eco-village. They used art, they used direct action, and they harnessed the power of that story to fight the city's plan. And get this, they didn't win by finding some watered-down consensus. They won by engaging in that healthy, productive conflict we were talking about. They didn't just participate in the city's process, they created their own. And that brings us right back to where we started. The story of Svartlamoen is so powerful because it shows that when a community is armed with its own narrative, and when it's not afraid to embrace conflict, it can actually challenge that old playbook. So the real question this leaves us with isn't just about planning meetings or zoning laws. It's about power. So I'll leave you with this. Who holds the pen in your community? Who gets to write the story of your landscape?